The acrid scent of burning metal hung thick in the air, mingling with the metallic taste of blood and smoke. Lieutenant Sarah Ward crouched low in the underbrush, her breath steady despite the chaos surrounding her. A lone alien drone hummed above, sweeping the scorched landscape. The forest was quiet, unnaturally so, but Ward knew better than to take that as a sign of safety. Her eyes tracked the drone's movements, waiting for the right moment. "Any sign of them?" Jenkins' voice crackled through her earpiece, the faint static hinting at their compromised communications. "Not yet," she whispered back, her voice as tight as her grip on her plasma rifle. "But they're close. Too close." Corporal Jenkins, always the optimist, had an uncanny ability to joke in the face of danger. But even he was silent now, hidden somewhere behind the debris of their wrecked ship. They'd crashed 3 days ago, and the hunters had been stalking them ever since. The hunters were relentless, elite trackers who specialized in eliminating surviving combatants like them, humans stranded on foreign soil, far from any reinforcements. "They'll find us, Lieutenant," Jenkins muttered, his usual bravado fading. "You know that." "They might find us," Ward replied, her voice cold steel. "But they won't leave alive." A rustling in the distance caught her attention. Ward signaled Jenkins to stay put as she adjusted her position, pressing her body flat against the earth. Her fingers brushed the dirt, its gritty texture grounding her. The alien hunters moved with precision, their steps barely audible as they stalked through the forest, cloaked in advanced technology that made them nearly invisible. But Ward had been trained to notice the subtle things, the disturbed leaves, the slight shift in the air, the faint hum of their cloaking devices. She spotted them, 3 hunters, their sleek armor reflecting the muted light of the dying sun. Each carried weapons far more advanced than anything she and Jenkins had, but Ward wasn't intimidated. She was human, and humans were unpredictable. Her heart pounded as she watched them advance. These creatures believed themselves invincible, their superior technology and biology making them arrogant. But that arrogance would be their downfall. "They're moving toward you," she murmured into her earpiece. "Great," Jenkins replied dryly. "Just where I want them." Ward stifled a smile. She could hear Jenkins tapping away at the alien tech he had scavenged from one of their fallen enemies. If anyone could rewire a plasma detonator with nothing but a multi-tool and a dream, it was him. But time was running out. The hunters paused, their leader, a towering figure with sleek black armor, raised a hand, signaling the others to fan out. They were getting closer to Jenkins' position. Too close. Ward took a deep breath, her finger hovering over the trigger. She couldn't let them find him. Not yet. A twig snapped underfoot, and all 3 hunters snapped their heads in unison toward the sound. Ward's blood ran cold. The game was up. She had seconds to act. "Now!" she hissed. The forest erupted into chaos. Plasma fire rained down from the hunters, scorching the trees as Ward rolled out from her hiding spot, firing in rapid bursts. Jenkins' trap sprung into action, a makeshift explosive, cobbled together from alien tech, detonated with a thunderous boom, engulfing the nearest hunter in a searing blue fireball. Ward didn't stop to admire the destruction. She was already moving, her body a blur of motion as she flanked the remaining 2 hunters. The smell of burning flesh filled the air as the leader roared in rage, firing blindly in her direction. "Get to the secondary position!" Ward shouted, her voice firm. She fired again, each shot calculated, each step a dance of survival. The hunters were faster, stronger, but they were predictable. And humans, as always, were anything but predictable. The leader charged, his plasma blade igniting with a sharp hiss. Ward met him head-on, ducking beneath his swing and firing point-blank into his chest. The armor absorbed most of the impact, but the force knocked him back, giving her the opening she needed. Jenkins' voice crackled in her ear again. "Lieutenant, they're bringing reinforcements. We need to move now." Ward's eyes flicked to the horizon, where the silhouette of an approaching ship loomed large. The battle was far from over. The ground shook beneath Sarah Ward's boots as the distant thrum of alien reinforcements grew louder, reverberating through the forest. The faint outline of the ship hovered menacingly in the twilight sky, its black hull gleaming like a predator stalking from above. She gritted her teeth, eyes scanning the tree line for Jenkins. "Lieutenant, I'm almost there." His voice crackled through her earpiece. "Got a bit hung up with some, friends." There was a pause, followed by the familiar crackle of plasma fire in the background. Ward exhaled sharply, her heartbeat a steady drum against the rising tension. They had minutes, maybe less, before the enemy pinpointed their position. She pressed against the trunk of a massive oak, trying to steady herself. The air was thick with humidity, making every breath feel heavy. Sweat trickled down her brow, stinging her eyes. "Get to the rally point," she ordered, voice firm. "We need to regroup before they surround us." A sharp rustle behind her sent her instincts into overdrive. She spun on her heel, rifle raised, finger poised over the trigger. For a split second, her muscles tensed, ready for an attack, but it was only Jenkins stumbling through the dense undergrowth. His face was streaked with dirt, and the makeshift bandage on his arm was soaked with blood. "You look like hell," Ward remarked, lowering her weapon. "And you look like a hero," Jenkins shot back, his usual smirk faltering. "I'd say we're even." Ward's eyes darted toward the sky again, noting the shift in the ship's trajectory. "They're closing in," she said, voice low. "We have to move, now." Without waiting for a response, she took off, weaving through the trees with Jenkins on her heels. The forest felt alive with tension, each snapping branch and rustling leaf amplified in her mind. Her boots pounded against the earth, every step a reminder of how little time they had left. "How many?" Jenkins called out between labored breaths, struggling to keep pace. "Enough to wipe us off the map," Ward replied grimly. "We won't survive a direct engagement. Our best chance is to outmaneuver them, draw them deeper into the woods, away from their ship." Jenkins nodded, grim determination hardening his features. "You always have a plan, don't you?" "I don't have the luxury of improvising," Ward replied, pushing back a branch and signaling for him to follow. The weight of leadership pressed heavily on her shoulders, but there was no room for doubt now. She had to focus on survival. As they descended deeper into the forest, the terrain grew more rugged, the trees thickening and the undergrowth becoming nearly impassable. The scent of pine mixed with the damp earth, and the air became cooler the further they went. "Got any bright ideas for when they finally catch up?" Jenkins asked, keeping his voice light despite the growing anxiety in his eyes. Ward glanced back at him, her expression unreadable. "Yeah. We make sure they regret ever setting foot on this planet." Suddenly, a deafening roar ripped through the sky. The alien ship had found them. The ground trembled beneath the force of its engines, trees swaying as its searchlights swept across the forest's floor. A bright beam of light slashed through the trees, nearly blinding them as it passed. "Down!" Ward barked, pulling Jenkins into a crouch. They huddled under a thicket, the scent of damp moss filling their noses as the lights hovered dangerously close. The ship circled above them, a cold, mechanical predator hunting its prey. "They're scanning the area," Jenkins whispered, his voice barely audible. Ward's mind raced. They couldn't stay hidden for long. The aliens' technology was too advanced for that. And yet, she couldn't risk an open fight. Not yet. She tightened her grip on her rifle, her knuckles white against the cool metal. "We're going to split up," she decided, her voice firm. "It'll divide their attention. You head west, find a defensible spot and hold out as long as you can. I'll lead them east, away from you." Jenkins stared at her, disbelief flashing in his eyes. "Splitting up? That's a death sentence." "It's the only way," Ward insisted. "If we stay together, they'll track us down in minutes. This gives us a chance, both of us." For a moment, Jenkins looked like he wanted to argue, but the cold truth of her words settled between them. He nodded slowly, his face grim. "You better come back, Lieutenant." Ward didn't respond. She couldn't afford to make promises. Not in a situation like this. As Jenkins disappeared into the dense forest, Ward took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her decision settle heavily on her chest. She was alone now, but she had to believe that Jenkins would hold out long enough. The roar of the ship's engines grew louder as it adjusted course, following her as she broke into a sprint. She could hear the hunters in pursuit, their footsteps faint but unmistakable, closing in like wolves on a wounded deer. Her pulse quickened. The terrain grew rougher, the ground uneven beneath her feet, but she pushed forward, determination coursing through her veins. She had to keep moving. She had to stay ahead. In the distance, the faint glow of the alien ship's engines cut through the trees, casting an eerie light over the landscape. Ward's breath came in ragged gasps as she pressed on, knowing that the real fight was just beginning. Ward moved like a shadow through the forest, her breath controlled despite the burning in her lungs. The alien ship's engines rumbled behind her, their relentless pursuit more than just a threat, it was a ticking clock. Her mind raced as fast as her legs, calculating every possible outcome. Jenkins was still out there, buying them both time. But time was a luxury they couldn't afford for long. The forest thinned as she approached a ridge overlooking a steep drop. Below, the terrain opened into a rocky gorge, a perfect place to force the enemy into a bottleneck. If she could lure the alien ground forces here, they'd be exposed, forced to confront her on her terms. Ward crouched low, scanning the area. The moonlight spilled over jagged rocks, casting long, eerie shadows. For a fleeting moment, she allowed herself to feel the weight of the situation, the gravity of the decision to split from Jenkins. He was resourceful, but they were still hopelessly outnumbered. And now, alone, her survival hinged on outthinking a foe with superior technology. Her earpiece crackled to life. "Lieutenant, you there?" Jenkins' voice sounded strained, but alive. "I'm here," she whispered back, eyes never leaving the ridgeline. "What's your status?" "Hold up west like you said. But I've got bad news, they've deployed ground troops. They're sweeping the forest. It's only a matter of time." Ward's jaw tightened. Ground troops meant they weren't just hunting, they were ready for a full-scale engagement. "Sit tight. I'm drawing the bulk of them away. If you see an opening, take it." Jenkins hesitated. "You're playing with fire, Ward." "I always do." She cut the transmission, focusing on the task at hand. Her plan was simple: draw the enemy into the gorge, use the terrain to level the playing field, and make them pay for every inch they took. She adjusted her rifle, the familiar weight of it grounding her, and moved deeper into the gorge. Behind her, the alien ship's engines whined louder, the sound now unnervingly close. She could hear the faint rustling of the alien troops moving through the trees, their strange, clicking language echoing in the night air. She crouched behind a boulder, waiting. The first of the aliens appeared, their silhouettes dark against the glowing sky. Tall, sleek, and armed with weapons far more advanced than anything Ward had in her arsenal. She counted 6 of them, their elongated limbs moving with an eerie grace. They fanned out, scanning the area, their weapons raised. Ward's heart pounded in her chest as she watched them descend into the gorge, unaware of the trap they were walking into. She needed to strike fast, cause confusion, force them to regroup. Her finger hovered over the trigger as the lead alien passed directly in front of her position. In one fluid motion, she squeezed the trigger. The crack of her rifle split the night air. The lead alien dropped instantly, its body crumpling to the ground. Chaos erupted as the others scattered, searching for the source of the shot. Ward darted from cover to cover, keeping low as she fired again, hitting another target. Plasma fire rained down on her position, the searing heat of the blasts lighting up the gorge like lightning strikes. She rolled behind a boulder as debris exploded around her. Her mind worked at lightning speed. She couldn't hold this position for long. The enemy would adapt, and she had no intention of being pinned down. She reloaded quickly, her movements precise and automatic. Another alien rushed forward, weapon raised, but Ward was faster. A quick shot to the chest, and it fell lifelessly to the ground. 3 down. 3 to go. Her breathing was shallow now, her limbs aching with exertion, but there was no time to rest. The remaining aliens regrouped, their movements more coordinated, more cautious. Ward shifted positions again, moving further up the gorge. She could feel the tension rising, her window of opportunity narrowing with every passing second. Suddenly, the alien ship roared overhead, its searchlights sweeping the area. The ground vibrated as it hovered ominously, clearly aware that their ground troops were being systematically picked off. Ward's stomach clenched as a new surge of adrenaline coursed through her veins. They were escalating. Then, a sound from her earpiece, Jenkins' voice, a harsh whisper. "Ward, something's wrong. They're shifting course. It's like they know where you are." Her blood ran cold. A trap. They'd been leading her into a tighter snare all along, waiting for the moment to spring it. Her cover was blown. Before she could respond, the ship's spotlight locked onto her position. She bolted from the rocks as plasma fire lit up the night, the ground erupting around her in bursts of molten debris. She could feel the heat at her back, searing closer with every step. She dove behind a crumbling outcrop, heart hammering in her chest. They had her pinned, and the ground forces were closing in fast. Jenkins' voice cut through the static, desperate now. "Ward, you've got to move! Get the hell out of there!" Ward's mind raced. There was no way out, no easy path to escape. But she wasn't ready to die in this gorge, and she wasn't about to let Jenkins go down without a fight. "I'm not done yet," she muttered, steeling herself for what was coming next. Her eyes flicked to the ship above, a new plan already forming. If they wanted a fight, she was going to give them one they'd never forget. Ward crouched low, her pulse thrumming in her ears as the ground vibrated from the alien ship hovering overhead. Dust and debris swirled around her, kicked up by the ship's thrusters, casting the gorge in an eerie haze. The spotlight was still locked on her position, and the remaining alien troops were closing in fast. She could hear their rhythmic, alien footsteps crunching over the rocks, their guttural commands echoing in the night air. There was no more time to run. She was trapped, pinned between the cliffs and the advancing forces. Her fingers tightened around her rifle, but she knew her odds of making it out alive were slim. The aliens had superior numbers and advanced weaponry. Her only advantage was the terrain, and even that was slipping away as the ship above adjusted its course, blocking off any potential escape routes. Jenkins' voice crackled in her earpiece again. "Ward, they're all over the place. You've got to move. There's nowhere to go." She interrupted, her voice tight but controlled. "They've got me pinned." A pause. Then Jenkins' voice came through again, softer now, almost resigned. "What's the plan, Lieutenant?" Ward exhaled slowly, her mind working through every option. The plan had always been to hold the gorge, to whittle down the enemy's forces and create an opening for extraction. But that plan had fallen apart the moment the ship zeroed in on her. Now, there was only one way out, and it wasn't pretty. "I'm going to take out the ship," she said, the words heavy on her tongue. "If I can disable their communications or their navigation, we might have a shot." Jenkins didn't respond immediately. When he did, there was a hint of disbelief in his tone. "You're going to take out a warship? By yourself? Got any better ideas?" Ward snapped, already moving into position. The truth was, she didn't know if it would work. The alien ship was massive, bristling with weapons and armor she couldn't hope to penetrate with her rifle. But there were always weak points. Every machine had a flaw, and Ward was counting on that. She scrambled up the rocky incline, keeping low as plasma bolts whizzed past her, exploding in bursts of searing heat against the cliffside. The air was thick with the smell of scorched rock and burning metal. Sweat dripped down her brow, and her muscles ached from the constant strain, but she pushed on, her focus unshakable. The ridge gave her just enough cover to get a clear view of the ship. Its hull was sleek, a dark metallic sheen reflecting the moonlight, and its engines thrummed with an ominous power. Ward's gaze locked onto a series of vents near the rear thrusters, an exhaust system, likely unshielded. It wasn't much, but it was a target. She took a deep breath, steadying her aim. The aliens below were still advancing, their weapons raised, their movements deliberate. One wrong move, and they would tear her apart before she even had a chance to fire. But hesitation wasn't an option. Not anymore. Ward exhaled slowly, her finger tightening on the trigger. The first shot rang out, striking one of the exposed vents with a metallic clang. Sparks flew, but the damage was minimal. The ship's thrusters faltered for a brief second, then roared back to life, its engines flaring as it adjusted course, now fully aware of her intent. "Come on!" Ward muttered, adjusting her aim. She fired again, this time hitting the vent dead center. A loud crack echoed through the gorge as the vent exploded in a shower of sparks, sending a plume of smoke billowing into the night sky. The ship wobbled, its engines sputtering, but it wasn't down yet. Ward could see the remaining alien troops scrambling, their focus shifting as the ship lurched violently, trying to stabilize. This was her moment. If she could disable the ship's navigation entirely, it would crash, taking out the bulk of the enemy forces in one fell swoop. But the aliens weren't about to let that happen. Plasma fire rained down from the ship's side turrets, the beams scorching the earth around her. Ward barely had time to dive behind a rock before the ground where she'd been standing erupted in a fiery explosion. The heat singed the back of her neck, but she ignored the pain, her mind locked on the target. She peeked over the edge of the rock, her heart pounding. The ship was still listing, its engines struggling to stay airborne. But it was now or never. "Jenkins," she said into her earpiece, her voice steady despite the chaos. "I need you to mark my position. If this works, get the hell out of here. If it doesn't, well, you know what to do." "Ward, you can't." "I can," she cut him off. "And I will. This is the only way." Without waiting for a response, she sprinted from cover, her rifle aimed squarely at the ship's remaining thrusters. The alien troops opened fire, plasma bolts streaking toward her, but Ward was already moving, weaving through the rocky terrain with practiced precision. She fired 3 more shots in rapid succession, each one finding its mark. The ship's engines sputtered one last time before the entire rear section detonated in a brilliant explosion. The shockwave knocked Ward off her feet, sending her crashing into the dirt as debris rained down around her. The ship lurched, tilting dangerously to one side, its systems failing as it plummeted toward the gorge. Ward struggled to her feet, her ears ringing, her body aching from the impact. But she didn't stop. She couldn't. The ship was coming down fast, and when it hit, the entire area would be obliterated. "Lieutenant!" Jenkins' voice screamed in her ear, but she didn't have time to respond. She was already running, the ground shaking beneath her as the ship's shadow loomed overhead. The roar of its engines filled the air, a deafening cacophony as it descended, smoke billowing from its crippled frame. And then, with a thunderous crash, the ship collided with the gorge, the impact sending a massive shockwave through the earth. Ward threw herself behind a boulder just as the explosion tore through the night, the heat and force of it so intense that she could feel it in her bones. For a moment, everything was still. Then, slowly, Ward pushed herself to her feet, her body bruised and battered but alive. She glanced at the wreckage, flames licking at the twisted metal, and allowed herself a grim smile. The fight wasn't over yet. But they'd just evened the odds,